Hi everyone, Fenris Models here, and today we'll be taking a look at the full build-out of Revell's McLaren 570S in 1/24th scale. The build starts with the engine, which is standard for automotive models in the same way that starting with the cockpit usually is for planes. Using a pair of sprue snips, I removed each part and placed them on the instructions where they were located. This is something that I do not only to make sure that I know what parts go where, but also to give myself a physical reminder of what parts still need to be assembled, or worse, to see if any part has gone missing. Then, using a fresh hobby blade, I trimmed back all of the gate marks, flashing, and any seam lines from the molding process. If you are careful with the blade, you can eliminate the need for sanding at this stage. To be honest, if I can avoid sanding, I will. It is absolutely my least favorite thing in this hobby. Once the parts had been cleaned, I could begin assembly. Every step was dry fitted before having a bead of Tamiya extra thin run along the join. Sometimes a little of the melted plastic would seep out of the seam and needed cleaning up with the blade. At certain points in the build, you will see me stopping assembly to do some quick painting before whatever I'm working on gets covered up. In this case, I needed to paint the engine. For this I used Vallejo Model Metallic Air Steel 71.065 and covered the entire engine with it. Parts were then picked out in Model Air NATO Black 71.251. Now that the engine had been completed, I could install it on the bottom plate of the car, which had been painted in Testors Spray Enamel Black. Once installed, I could begin on the next portion, the engine cage frame thing. This was painted using the same steel and black colors, and then everything got a heavy wash of Tamiya panel line accent color black. With the engine compartment done, I could move on to the wheels. Each piece was removed and cleaned in the same manner as before, and then assembled per the directions. Before applying the rubber tires, I gave each rim a coat of NATO Black inside and out, and I made sure to leave the spokes free of paint, as those would be getting a coat of the steel. The brake discs were painted in Mecha Color gunmetal and the calipers in Model Color flat red. Once everything dried, I could affix the wheels to the brakes and then both of those to the axles, which were then installed on the bottom plate of the car. Next, I can move on to the interior of the car. I wanted to try something different here. Using Model Air Orange 71.083, I picked out a few pieces on the seat, the doors, and the dashboard to give it a pop of color. This was then carefully masked with Tamiya masking tape once dry. Everything then got a coat of the same NATO Black as before to tie it all together. Including the main tub that would house the interior pieces. Once dry, I picked out a few details in both steel and gunmetal, as well as applied a few decals to the dashboard. You can see here, however, that I did unfortunately get some minor leakage under the masking. It wasn't horrible, but definitely something to improve on the next one. And then it was time to work on the part I was the most nervous about, the exterior. To prep the body parts, I gave it all a light sanding with a fine sanding stick. It's something like 12 or 15,000 grit, just enough to make the plastic a little bit hazy. I then took it outside and gave it a light coat of Testors Extreme Lacquer Lime Ice from a rattle can. This was allowed to dry for 15 minutes before I gave it a second coat, and after another 15 minutes, it received a third. The process was then repeated with Testors Extreme Lacquer Wet Look Clear, which is just their gloss clear coat. Except that this time I waited for half an hour between coats rather than 15 minutes. The end result is very glossy with no orange peel, and more importantly, no need to wet sand and polish. Next it was time to add in all of the detail pieces such as the windshields, the headlights, assembling the doors, etc. Most of what was added during this stage received more black. The window frames and trim, the headlights, the door trim. Even some of the exterior body panels received some black. Both the side skirts, well, I think that's what those are called. Anyway, the side skirts and the rear received a coat of the black. Once everything was painted, I could begin final assembly. I did run into an issue here with the headlights. They did not quite fit as the slots for them were actually a little wider than the piece itself. This caused the lights to shift forward a little, giving the car a little bit of a bug-eyed effect. I'm not terribly worried about it though, since that will be, shall we say, rectified when I get around to the diorama. Other than that though, the remaining build went smoothly. Oh, I did need to clean up the window trim lines a little using a toothpick to gently scrape off excess paint. Before I could close it up, I also needed to paint the interior of the body shell in a matching black to the rest of the interior pieces. To get the body to close up, it is a little finagly. There's a lip just past where the windshield wipers go that sits underneath the dashboard, so you have to work it in. There's enough tolerances that if you follow the directions properly, it shouldn't be too much of a hassle, but it is something to be aware of. There's also two little tabs that click into slots just below the seats on either side. I ended up scratching a little bit of the paint here, so I touched that up before fixing the door halves together. There were also some carbon fiber decals to be applied on the doors. These decals were a pain. They only needed to be soaked for maybe 30 seconds in cold water, and then they would immediately drift off the backing paper. But then once applied, they would crack and tear just at the lightest touch. I was able to get the pieces to line up just fine with each other, so you couldn't really tell, but man, it was frustrating. And it wasn't just the ones on the doors. The one for the roof and the trunk also fought me the whole way. After that, there were only a few parts left to install. These rear lights needed a coat of Tamiya Clear Red X27 after getting fixed in place. In addition to the large decals, there were a few small ones that needed to be applied as well, such as the McLaren insignias and the license plates. All that was left was to put on the doors, and we can call this one done. You'll notice that I am not gluing them in place. As mentioned earlier, I have a diorama planned for this guy that I'll need them free for. And there you have it, the McLaren 570S from Revell in 1/24th scale. I really enjoyed this build, and I think it turned out pretty good, especially considering that it's my first automobile model in years and the first one that I've really given a lot of effort into. However, it is far from perfect. In addition to the issues with the headlights, the masking, and the decals that were all mentioned in the video, you probably can notice all of the imperfections in the paint on the doors. This was because both doors, fell out of their gator clips when getting their second coat of paint and landed on the dirty floor of my patio. It's not the end of the world, but it really does detract from it, I think. Oh well, I think I can work with it though. Other than that, I'm quite happy with it. Tell me in the comments below what you thought of the build, and what your predictions are for the upcoming diorama. Just don't give it away if you're one of the people that already knows. Thank you to my gift set tier patron, Calibear. And thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment on your favorite part of this build and whether or not you might consider picking up this kit for yourself. If you want to watch more of my content, how about this video right here that YouTube has recommended just for you? And in the meantime, stay safe and keep modeling.